What's up guys, Shawnthebro here, and in today's episode of the Super Smash Brothers and Platform Fighter tutorial series, we are going to be going over how we can improve throwing weapons in our game and throwing weapons in the air, because previously in the series we could throw weapons but we couldn't throw them in the air. At a few different points in the series that was technically possible to do, but just due to bugs and such that we've since fixed. Now we want to make it work with our actual system that we have. So we come through our character select, our stage select here. We're in the game, and I'm controlling the Shawnthebro character, so I can go and pick up a weapon or item, and I can drop it by pressing the button if I'm not moving. If I'm moving a direction, like, for example, left, I can throw the weapon left. If I pick up another weapon, and I'm moving right, I will be able to throw it right. If I pick up another one, I can jump and press it to drop it. Now, all that's working as intended, but the next two won't have been working prior to this episode. Let's get into another game here so that we have enough time. So if I am to face to the right, jump to the right, and release it in the air, I can now throw it to the right in the air. And I can pick up that weapon again and do the same thing but to the left. And throw it left. So there we go. Now we can throw directionally based on the direction we are facing, the direction we're actually pressing while we're in the air. And it works flawlessly. It's really smooth. So that's what we're going to be covering today. If you're interested in getting caught up in the series before checking out this episode so you see how we've done everything from our damage counters, our match timers, so on and so forth, I'll link you to the entire playlist of the Super Smash Brothers and Platform Fighter tutorial series right here in the top right corner. Alternatively, if you don't care about that, you just care about your weapons being thrown in the air or just in general, I'll link you to the first episode of items in the Super Smash Bros. Series, because this logic is building off of a lot of the other episodes that we have on items. So the first episode's right there in the top right corner. With that out of the way, we can go ahead and get started. So this is a code and blueprint tutorial series. We're going to be doing everything in the code today. So first things first, let's go to the code, which is Visual Studio. So here we are, and I want to go into my SSB template character.h, or essentially my base character.h. In the series previously, we had the ability to check and see if someone was pressing up. So if the player was currently pressing the up button or the jump button. This is important because there are times where we don't just care about when they actually press it, but we want to know if they're still pressing it or still holding it. So we had this boolean previously. That one's not going to be relevant for today's episode, but we want to do something similar for today's episode. We need to know if the player is currently pressing or holding the left button or the right button, or a left input or a right input. This counts if you're on keyboard or if you're on joysticks. Any input is fine, just if we're pressing to the left or if we're pressing to the right. So make two new booleans today. Bool is pressing left and bool is pressing right. Simple enough so far. Let's go into the SSB template character.cpp and go to the constructor, which is this first function where we set all the default values for variables. I want to scroll down to my variables, and I found is pressing up being equal false here. So I went ahead and added these two right below it. Is pressing left equals false and is pressing right equals false. I made these false by default because when this character is spawned in, the player is not pressing left or right. Now, if the player is pressing left or right, it will be picked up on the first frame while we're listening for input. So it'll be updated immediately when that's available to us. And it doesn't really matter if it was false to begin with. But by default, it should be false because we don't want to assume it's true by default. Next thing to do is go to the move right function. Move right is our input axis where we determine if we're moving to the left, right, or not at all. So it has a value of -1 to 1. -1 means we are moving to the left. 1 means we're moving to the right. 0 means we're not moving. Values between 0 and -1 and 0 or 1 are percentages, or really ratios of how much to the left or how much to the right. In this function, we were getting our game instance and determining if this was the proper input method for move right, because we have move right and move right controller. It's not required that you have both of these. This is just set up this way because sometimes we may want to have some things that are different on keyboard than they are on a controller with analog sticks. So I have move right and move right controller, but it's fine if you just have move right. But these first two checks are basically determining this is the correct move right function for us to use. And then we had a giant if statement here that checks a bunch of states just to make sure we're not blocking, we're not stunned, we're not taunting, we're not in the victory, we're not defeated, we're not eliminated, and we can move. Basically, just, are we in a state where we can move a direction? If we are, we go in here and we actually add movement in the direction. Then we were determining what the value was. So if it was a left value, we were actually saying that the character is not facing right because they're facing left, and we were rotating the character. Then we were also setting their state to be moving left if possible. So if they weren't in the jumping state and they weren't in the recovery state, we were updating it to be moving left. I've added 2 new lines today, and that is setting is pressing left to be true and is pressing right to be false. So we know this condition is our moving left condition, our pressing left condition. So at this point, is pressing left is true. Now I'm setting is pressing right to be false. On a keyboard, you can be pressing left and right at the same time without any issue. If you are, however, you have to choose what you want that to look like in the game. So for me, what I'm saying is whatever input I press last, that's going to have priority over the others. So if I'm pressing left at the current time of this move right, which is called every frame, then left becomes the priority. So the player is pressing left, meaning they released right, or are pressing both, so give left priority. I'm going to change the word released here, meaning they are not pressing right, or are pressing both. Give left priority. And then under that, we have another else if here. This one's checking to see if value is greater than 0. So the first one was checking if value was less than 0. That was for left. This one's for value greater than 0. That's for right. We know this because we set is facing right to be true. And we were setting the character state to be moving right if they weren't in the jumping state or the recovery state. So in this case, I want to set is pressing left to be false and is pressing right to be true, because the player is pressing right, meaning they release left or are pressing both, give right the priority. I'm going to change the term released here again. I'm going to say they are not pressing left or are pressing both. So just doing the opposite, this time right has priority. Then we have an else statement here, which is basically the value is not less than 0 and it's not greater than 0. That means it is equal to 0 or within the dead zone, and that means that neither direction is being pressed. So the player is not pressing left or right, and both is pressing left and is pressing right get set to false. Then we reset the character state back to idle, assuming they're not jumping or in recovery. Now, if you have move right controller, and you want to update both these, by all means do it. You can flat out copy these because it is the same behavior from move right to move right controller. So this first one, we're adding is pressing left equals true, is pressing right equals false. For the else if, it is going to be the opposite. So we're going to set is pressing left to be false, is pressing right to be true. And lastly is the else statement. So we're going to set both to false. Just like that. So that's move right and move right controller done. Now one thing you might notice is that I was setting these is pressing left and is pressing right variables inside of this if statement, where we check for the certain states. That's fine for my logic today, and so far everything that I have in the game, but you might still want to track these directions outside of these states. If so, that's perfectly fine. We can refactor this to check the value and just set the is pressing left or is pressing right, like so. You don't have to follow this, but if you wanted to, you could do this and just set these variables in here. And you could do it outside of this if statement. And then you won't have to do them in here as well. You don't have to do that for anything in today's episode or again throughout the series as a whole yet. But your game might be a little bit different than mine and you might want that. So just be aware that is an option you have. Once we have these set up, we want to go to our grab function because grab is also our throw. That's just because the grab button happens to be the same button as the throw button in Super Smash Brothers, and I just copied that. So in the grab function, we were checking against certain states to make sure we weren't in any of the states where we can't grab or throw. So eliminated, defeated, victory, dead, stunned, and we have the ability to move. If we pass that if statement, we go into here where we check to see if we have an equipped item, or basically if the character is holding an item. If they are, then we don't do the grapple logic here. We do this logic here, which is going to be our throwing or dropping logic. The first if statement was if the character state equals moving right, and that was the entire thing before. I've added an or here, is pressing right, so that if we're either moving right or pressing right, we're going to throw it this direction, to the right. However, we may be moving right and pressing left, or moving left and pressing right. Say you have a frame or two between pressing the input and actually changing directions, you would still throw it the wrong direction if you threw within that frame or two window. So this is another case where you may want to change the logic a little bit. You could very easily just remove this character state equals moving right and do if is pressing right. So if we're pressing right at all, we're going to throw it to the right. Again, it's up to you. It is your preference. This will affect not just the air throws, but the regular throws. Then we had an else if to see if the character state was moving left, and in today's episode I've added or is pressing left. And from my previous conversation, we can remove the entire state check and just check else if is pressing left. So if we're pressing right, throw it to the right. If we're pressing left, throw it to the left. The else is we're just going to drop it, and that logic is not changing. At this point, we can launch the editor again and test it out. At this point, we come into the game, and we can skip through everything. And we just want to go through the same test we did at the start of the episode. So if I equip this item, I should be able to drop it in the air, drop it regularly. I can do both. I should be able to walk and throw it to the left, which I can do. I should be able to walk and throw it to the right, which I can do. Jump and throw it to the right. Then I should be able to jump and throw it to the left. And I can do all of those things, so our logic is working as intended. So there you go, guys. I hope I helped you with throwing your items, making that more consistent and cleaner, as well as being able to throw them in the air properly. If I did help you, please subscribe. It does more for myself and the channel than anything else you can do, and that support is completely free. I want to give a huge shout out to my YouTube membership, Patreon members, and Discord supporters. You guys are amazing, and thank you guys so much for all the love and support. If you ran into any problems while following this tutorial or any of my tutorials, feel free to join the Discord community. There's a link in the description, and I would be happy to help you out. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Shawnthebro, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye, guys.